Hello, I am Clint Stoker and I write comics, and we're going to talk about a little bit about comics today and how it sort of spills over into film. Now, Screen Rant is usually in what I would call utter denial of anything that is wrong with comics ever. But in this case, they've made a complete about face. They've changed everything, and it's kind of astonishing to see this argument being made. So essentially in this article, they lay out all the reasons why this phase 4 or this all new, all different Marvel phase was such a failure when it came to the comic books, and changing all of the characters for the sake of superficial reasons. And at the same time, this article is also defending that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is actually not going to make the same mistakes, and they're going to do this change in the diversity correctly. Now, I think this guy, Thomas Bacon, I think he makes some good points. There's some good arguments to be had here, but it's kind of, it's denying the underlying cause, I think, of the failure of these kinds of changes that happen in comics. Now, so he acknowledges that this was, he calls it the most controversial era in comics, and that is what phase 4 of the MCU is inspired from, the most controversial era in comics. First off, acknowledging that there is controversy is kind of amazing, really, because it always seemed like before nobody was acknowledging that fans had a problem with it. Not only was that a problem, but here in this article, he admits that fans were divided. Thank you. This is just a little thing, but to know that you acknowledge that comics fans were not all like-minded and it wasn't just some major success, that's a big step forward. Just to admit that is amazing. Now, this admission, of course, is only going to come because there has to be this groundwork laid for why the MCU is going to do it better. Right. So you have to acknowledge that this doesn't work. This reminds me entirely of, I mean, we've got the Democrat national debates happening. It's the same kind of thing. Like, everybody loves President Obama until they're running against each other, and then everybody's going to throw him under the bus. Or everybody loves, whatever it is, until they're being pitted against each other. So yeah, they all loved that phase in comics. Until now, they have to draw a distinction, a difference between the films and the comics. All right, so I'm going to go through some of these differences that he laid out in the article. One is that actors change. And so whereas in comics, you can potentially have the exact same character, they're going to vary from how they're drawn, and that's just it's just a stylistic thing that the artist might do. But you essentially have those characters and they're immortal. They're always going to exist. You have the opportunity to keep perpetuating those heroes and those stories as long as you could ever hope to do so. But in this case, it's different because if you're watching a movie, the actors are only going to want to act for so long, or eventually they're going to get older, they're going to die, or things change. And so it kind of, there's that built-in sense of change, like the things are going to have to change eventually if you want this same storyline to keep progressing. So I get that, and I think most people understand that that's something that eventually would happen, assuming that superhero films keep making money and people still have an appetite for that kind of stuff in movies. So the argument that he makes is that the legacy characters, these are some of the ways, I guess, that you pass the torch on to somebody else. One is just flat out changing a character and making it the new norm. And you saw this with Iceman, right? It was just a fundamental change with the character. With other characters, they'll be killed off. They'll be damaged in humiliating ways. Not my words. This is Screen Rant saying humiliating ways. Absolutely. Thor not being able to being worthy of his hammer. Some of the deaths that happened in comics were pretty upsetting to a lot of people. And then they've already set up the new characters, the replacements, up for failure. Now, I would contend that it has more to do with bad than just bad storytelling, which, don't get me wrong, the bad storytelling is a huge aspect of it. But the other component of it is, why are they changing those characters? Is it driven out of, hey, these characters are too white and too male and too straight, so we have to change them because that's bad? You can see how that is annoying because it becomes about identity politics and not about the story. Now, if you're just going along with the story and it makes sense, you might be able to convince people that it's the way to go. But certainly how those stories are handled, people have had more patience with some stories. Like I'm thinking of Miles Morales as Spider-Man, as opposed to other ones like Captain America, Thor, so on and so on. Okay, so touching on this idea, they say here, of legacy characters. The thing is, some characters work in a legacy mindset, right? And it does bring up Green Lantern, and there's a few other superheroes where it makes sense, where it genuinely is a mantle that they pass on. The problem is with especially a lot of Marvel stories is it's never been a mantle. It's that individual character that has those powers and the responsibility that goes along with it and so forth. And so this idea of it just being a mantle you pass around, it's just not true all the time. And so using that as an excuse is really silly, and it does make people pretty upset. Okay, so another thing that they blame on the failure of comics isn't just the writing, it's the distribution method. And I hadn't heard about this before. I mean, I knew that there's a problem with distribution. I think most people that read comics know there's a problem. But the reason this is so interesting and different is because he actually pointed out that because distribution and marketing were not trying to reach new audiences for these all new characters, they were still trying to sell to the same group of fans that had been loyal to them and loyal to those characters that they had killed off or humiliated. The people didn't react well to it. This had not occurred to me, but it's a great point. Had they created new characters and actually abandoned their fan base, however terrible that sounds, but if they abandoned their fan base and actually went after and went to market to other folks, whoever this imaginary audience is that they're trying to aim for, they might have been able to sell it, right? And make a new audience for it, because it'd be new for people. They wouldn't care about the existing characters, and they could love what's great about the new characters. But the truth is, they still tried to sell the same stuff to the fans that they insulted by humiliating their characters, killing them off, or whatnot. So that didn't work. And here we have, this is like the first time I've ever seen Screen Rant admit that it didn't work and that there was some kind of failure. Okay, you may have heard this quote before. This is from a retailer summit from Marvel, and this is something that they learned in the midst of all this change that had happened. They said, quote, "What we learned was that people didn't want any more diversity. We saw the sales of any character that was diverse, any character that was new, our female characters, anything that was not a core Marvel character, people were turning up their nose against. That was difficult for us because we had a lot of fresh, new, exciting ideas that we were trying to get out, and nothing really worked." This is another problem that was not pointed out in this article, and that is, if you have a lot of fresh ideas that you want to get out there, doing it all at the same time is a really bad idea. Or not necessarily at the same time, but so close together, it's a bad idea. People don't like change, right? I mean, if you've been reading comics your whole life, you've been enjoying the characters, you liked some kind of excitement, some kind of things happening, obviously. But having massive changes like that is annoying. It's upsetting. People don't like it. And I would say it has less to do with diversity. Like they said here, these people didn't want any more diversity. It has to do with the ideology behind it. You're changing characters. You're making new characters because you believe that there's something wrong with the existing characters. You believe that there's something wrong with the existing fan base. That is insulting. And if you'd recognize that, I think you could make things a lot better. Treat your customers well, treat your readers well who have been supporting your business, and they'll treat you well back. Why would you expect people to just love the new characters as replacements? Like, and it doesn't matter. We just love these new characters. I don't know what's going to happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what people will think. I am cautious, very cautious. I actually am pretty happy with the MCU so far. It feels like it kind of wrapped up, and so if I didn't watch another movie from here on out, I'd be just fine with that. But we'll see how it goes. Obviously, I'm going to give them a shot and see what happens. But to go over the same mistakes and to try to do it again, only better, I don't think that's a great idea. Something you have to point out too is firstly, you should say first. It has to be acknowledged, not firstly. That's not a word. All right, so here's the conclusion here, and that is that it's too simple, quote here, it's too simple then to say that Marvel Studios should ignore the all new, all different Marvel because it didn't prove to be a long-term success for the comics. In reality, a better argument would be that Marvel should adapt with care, taking the strong ethos while avoiding making similar mistakes. Fortunately, all signs indicate that this is just what the studios are doing. Now remember, he went over the things that he thought should change, and one of those was finding a new audience instead of the same audience. And so I'm really interested to know why they think going for a more diverse crowd, so to speak, is going to be the way to go. This is interesting because I'm comparing this actually to the Gillette shaver ad. I read somewhere that Gillette was actually in really, really dire financial trouble before they started doing their woke marketing campaigns. And so it's possible, well, from their point of view, they were doing the woke marketing because they knew that they were on their way out. And so rather than try to get as many people as they could, they were going to try and appeal to people and get a really loyal, small following and hope that that makes up for it. So it kind of makes you wonder then, does Marvel know if they're going for their woke marketing? Do they know that the MCU is on its way out, that it has peaked and that it's lowering, and so they're trying to go for some kind of loyal following instead of taking care of the customers that have brought them this far? I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. And just to be clear, like when these conversations come up, it's not about diversity, and I kind of hate that they always bring that up. Diversity happens naturally if you're writing stories. It's just like you want things to be interesting. There's a variety of people with a variety of different backgrounds. What I think people have a problem with, and I can only speak for myself, is that there's something deemed wrong with existing characters and fan bases because of identity politics. And so these changes come in really heavy-handedly, and also they are lecturing on their way in to inform readers that they need to change or be better or whatever it is, because there's something wrong with them. That's really upsetting. I wish people could figure this out. It seemed like 20 years ago, this wasn't a problem. There was diversity in storytelling, but there wasn't the ideology behind it. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have not backed Downcast yet, this is my comic book. It is on Indiegogo and in demand, and we're getting really, really close to 29,000. Thank you. I've got some new backers since the last video I posted. The link is in the description below. Please do back it, and I will talk to you next time.